I've got a guy who's emotionally, probably inadequate is the right word, certainly bullied and bruised and finds it difficult to empathise with people.
And then swears that he's going to take on the woke mind virus.
There's no court of public opinion that can govern him, and he is going to do essentially whatever he wants.
Tell me about this guy, because he only becomes American in his 20s when he goes to university, but his past is critical, isn't it?
Yeah, so Elon Musk is South African. He lived in South Africa till he was 17, and he had a violent childhood. So he grew up in apartheid era South Africa. He used to go to anti-apartheid marches, and he would see machetes and knives and actual violence. So that was a kind of regular part of life. And on top of that, the violence in his life comes in many different forms, because there was the anti-apartheid rallies. There was the fact that he got beaten up so badly at school regularly. So Elon Musk has Asperger's, which means he's on the autism spectrum. He struggled to express his emotions. He was bullied very badly at school, was once pushed down the stairs so badly his brother said that he bled so much he didn't recognize him. He spent a week in hospital.
Yeah. Now, then we often talk about him as an engineer. You know, he's this guy who can develop spaceships and can develop electric cars. But the little reading I've done, he's not really an engineer.
So he studies physics and economics in America after a detour via Canada. So he'd never studied engineering. The way lots of people at Tesla talk about him, it's interesting. He's got a kind of a manifesto of how you lead a company. And he says the CEO's office should never be reached through the finance people. You should always reach the CEO after having to walk past the engineers. And he says that his job as a leader is to kind of assemble the world's best engineers. And the engineering that he's done at his companies, whether it's him or it's the great engineers that he's assembled, is absolutely astonishing. But before we get to why he's so excited about engineering, it's worth just talking about the influence of science fiction, because he does have this kind of messianic complex. He does have this desire to turn science fiction and fantasy into reality, and he was particularly influenced by Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide.
I was going to say, that's the funny thing. A Radio 4 series, people often forget that, The Hitchhiker's was a Radio 4 series, is critical to the guy who's the richest guy on the planet.
And the insight that he takes from, so he says he had a sort of existential crisis as a teenager. He was getting beaten up, and he just read and read and read and read. He lost himself in games, started coding and designing his own games and software by the age of 12, and he read a huge amount of science fiction. And the fundamental insight from Douglas Adams that Elon Musk is still motivated by today was the feeling that life and civilization and consciousness might be, as he describes it, just this tiny candle in the infinite darkness. And therefore, if consciousness is this extremely improbable thing, you have to do everything you can to preserve it. Hence his desire to make humanity multiplanetary, and his desire, as he would say, to make humanity reconciled with Earth by solving climate change.
I'm only halfway there, though. So I've got a brilliant mind, a sci-fi based visionary. I've got a guy who's emotionally, probably inadequate is the right word, certainly bullied and bruised and finds it difficult to empathise with people because of his youth, but maybe has that defiance that comes from being bullied. But that doesn't explain what I said at the top, which is this guy says, I've never voted Republican, who actually backs Ron DeSantis to be an alternative to Donald Trump, clashes with Trump, and now is his biggest cheerleader. Now, what do you think explains that journey?
Well, it's one hell of a journey, and I think it comes down to one particular event. So Elon Musk also has, it's worth saying, an extraordinary capacity to focus. He talks about that a lot. It says it comes from his Asperger's. He applies for a job at Netscape, one of the first internet companies, doesn't get it, and then he gets to know a guy called Peter Thiel. Now, Peter Thiel, spelled Thiel, is probably the most influential and famous billionaire investor in America, very close to Donald Trump. And over 15 or 20 years, Elon Musk, together with these very powerful figures like Larry Page of Google, like Peter Thiel, starts building all of these companies. So he builds Tesla, reinvents the electric car. He builds SpaceX, which is about making rockets reusable. He has Starlink, which creates Wi-Fi across the world. He's got a company called The Boring Company, which is about underground tunneling. But he also believes that one of the great threats to humanity and civilization is that we're running out of kids. So he's had many kids himself. He's currently up to 12 by many different women. His eldest kid was a boy called Xavier, and he gets a message from Xavier a few years ago now saying that Xavier is going to transition and become a girl, Jenna. And this causes Musk a lot of disquiet. And when Xavier becomes Jenna, Jenna becomes, as Musk would describe it, very woke, very anti-capitalist, very anti-billionaires. And this causes a big crisis for Musk.
Yeah. And it's a crisis that you can then work out the route from that
Yes.
to the takeover of Twitter, and from that to the support about Mr. Anti-Woke Donald Trump.
Exactly, because Musk tries to reconcile himself with his eldest child by selling 5 houses. Weird thing about Elon Musk, might be worth $250 billion, lives a weird sort of ascetic lifestyle, doesn't own many homes, doesn't own a yacht, has one plane for convenience, but basically lives in a 2-bedroom house in Texas. He sells these 5 houses, tries to be reconciled with Jenna, his once son, now daughter, doesn't work, and then swears that he's going to take on the woke mind virus. And it's then that he becomes somewhat radicalized, buys Twitter, clearly overpays for it, decides that the great threat to America is the woke mind virus, whether that's a threat to free speech or large-scale immigration. And it's that antipathy to what he calls the woke mind virus, owing to the pain of his broken relationship with his eldest child, who's transitioned, that leads to Donald Trump.
Well, let's bring in a man who knows it incredibly well, Ryan Mack, technology reporter at the New York Times. He's written a book with his colleague Kate Conger called Character Limit: How Elon Musk Destroyed Twitter. Ryan, welcome to the Today podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Is this just a deal? You know, Trump is the biggest deal maker on the planet, or likes to present himself as such. And Elon Musk needs someone to deal with to protect his investments in electric vehicles, heavily subsidized, space, heavily subsidized, and so on. Is that what this is about? Which explains why he's close to the Chinese and the Turks and the Indians. And in the end, that'll trump anything in his political views. He wants someone to protect his economic interests.
I think it's very interesting to watch the evolution of the relationship between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. I mean, 2 years ago, they were at each other's throats. You had Elon Musk saying that Donald Trump should sail into the sunset and not run for election again. He was supporting Ron DeSantis, as you said in your intro. And Donald Trump was saying that Elon Musk was essentially a con man. He was a BS artist who would come to the Oval Office and beg on his knees if he asked him to. You know, they were not friends by any stretch of the imagination. And you look at that evolution of what's happened today to the point where they're speaking on the phone multiple times a day. Elon Musk is stumping for him in Pennsylvania. He has contributed so far $75 million to a PAC supporting Donald Trump. And yes, it's a marriage of convenience. We just had a story run this weekend about the numerous federal investigations and inquiries into Elon's companies that we know of, more than 20. And one can easily see why he's supporting a candidate that is talking about deregulation and, you know, trying to build an ally of someone that could potentially lessen that scrutiny.
One of the things we're kind of having to think about in this country, Ryan, is how do you deal with him? I mean, you know, if he, regardless of what happens in the American election, you know, he is tweeting about, you know, the Labour Party and about this country. This is war. This is civil war is coming to Europe. You know, what... You know, is he a pragmatist who, if Kamala Harris wins and the Labour Party goes over there, he'll end up just, you know, doing what he needs to and change his mind again? Or is there some technique for getting out of Elon Musk what, you know, this country and others need?
I think it's the central question of this book, and I think we come down to the essentially the answer that he is somewhat unregulatable. Like, there is nothing that can hold him in check. He is incredibly powerful with a net worth, as we said, around $250 billion on any given day. But from a power perspective, he controls major companies in Tesla, the dominant electric car manufacturer in most places around the world. He has a virtual monopoly on getting things into space. So you asked this question of what happens if Kamala Harris wins, what does that mean for him? I think he is fine. You know, despite his overt political action and support of Donald Trump, he is in a spot where, you know, most business people would want to be in. He's an enviable spot. And I think he's reached the certain realization that there is nothing that can regulate him. There's no law, there's no regulator, there's no court of public opinion that can govern him. And he is going to do essentially whatever he wants.